But yeah, no.
I was thinking that with a project like that, it allows you to scout a bunch of potential places to root new ideas.
Oh yeah, I mean, you saw like in Haunted Forests or in Terrors of the
Yeah,
Sea, saw that there's quite a few places, and yeah, it just gave me a great excuse to travel around England and the UK and just find even more places and stories. And I just love seeing all these things from a more of an outsider view, and kind of, because that's how I treated the HEX and the Lake District as well. Like, it was a huge gift to me. Like, a lot of people go with, like, you write what you know, and it comes from you and from your own experience, and I think the two of you talked about it in the previous podcast as well. To me, that's always been more difficult. I like to be like a chameleon that comes from the outside, infiltrates, and starts to pretend that, it's like, that's how I get it, because I start seeing, you know when you've grown up around the place, and you start, you might walk.
yeah,
If you grew up next to Notre Dame de Paris, it's just a church next door, right? You don't really appreciate it. And I mean, I know when I had friends come and visit in on my street in Bulgaria when I'm born and everything, and they'll stay and they'll just look at like a balcony or something. It's like, what are you doing? We're going to get some bread. Like, that's George, this is George, this is incredible. It's like, really, is it? So me seeing the Lake District for the first time is just, it's like in a way, like you appreciate like an impressionist painter, because it's like the time of day. What time of year did you see it for the first time? What was that first expression that you got from that?
Yeah.
And gives you a certain feeling that it's just not the same if something that you revisit over and over again, or if it's quite a lot instilled in your culture. There's baggage.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
I was going to say, because you're from Bulgaria originally, but all the films you've made, the fiction and the documentary ones, are very, very rooted in and have this affinity with not only the landscape of the UK, but its its folklore, its past, its mythology, which is kind of a. I mean, obviously, I could totally get what you're saying about when you're coming in from kind of outside, you get that perspective on an area that somebody who's grown up with and familiar with it doesn't have. But where does that particular affinity for British English folklore come from for you?
From childhood, really. I mean, I grew up a family of artists. So my grandfather, he was a theater director. My mother, an actress. My dad's a painter. So there's a lot of combinations of that. So my granddad did a lot of Shakespeare, especially Shakespeare comedies. So like there's a lot of English stuff coming from there, and then from my dad on the visual side, and
all the illustrations for the Sideworld.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely, yes, and that's why he was an easy choice for that, because he used to do illustrations for like old books around that time, but is that mixture again? I like mixing things, and it's like a lot of influences from history. I love the history as well. That's where kind of the Civil War thing comes from, and it's not just for Britain. I have the same interest in a lot of other countries, but it was, you have to take them one at a time, first of all, and then you're always going to have some places you have just a little bit more affinity towards, and especially if you spend a lot of time and friends and our companies here, and we made the films here, so the Britishness is slowly taking over me, So,
you're slowly being converted.
Yeah, it's like I infiltrated, and now I'm starting to forget, who I am. Which is even better, because then at some point I can go back in Bulgaria and then have the same outsider film, be like, oh, what folklore is this? And then do a film there. But I guess it's a lot of stuff. And but no, put me in like Ohio or something. I'm gonna do the same.
I was reminded a little bit of Peter Strickland, because his first film was kind of like, here's a British director making his first film. What are you going to do, Peter? I'm going to go and make a revenge thriller set in Transylvania and film it in Hungarian.
Yep.
Yeah.
I kind of like that.
No. Me too. I'm very interested in what people immediately see, and especially if it's meant to be as an impressionistic view rather than oh, I understand better than everybody who lives here, with a wagging finger. I think
Well, yeah.
that will probably not work.
Yeah.
That might lead to a real life Wicker Man type scenario.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm really hopeful that all these haunted villages now that they're gonna watch. I hope the people of like Pressbury or something don't end up, skewering me or something.
Flood of people rushing in, going, "Where are the ghosts? Where are the haunted stuff?"
Like, you really told the story about my grandfather so I'm careful.
Can I assume whatever fiction film you do next will be built around Dan?
It's possible. Yeah, I mean, there is. I can't confirm or deny anything.
Okay, all right.
I'll just hope. I'm joking.
I've got to say that
because it's always nice to have somebody who's like front and center.
Oh no, absolutely. No, no, it's there's no way. Why would you not use your best assets? Like it's
exactly
stupid.
Exactly.
You both, because both the characters you play for George, both Richard and Hex and Martin and the Droving, they're quite driven, single-minded sort of characters. Is that like you in real life, or is there any particular reason George keeps casting you as these sorts of fairly figures?
No, I don't think that's like me. I'm nothing like. Well, especially like nothing like Martin. I tell you that.
Not at all.
But yeah, I don't really know. Like, I think a lot of characters that I would like normally I get cast as are like the kind of goofy sort of kind of quiet, quirky, funny-looking dude with big teeth. So yeah, it's weird. Like I can do the sort of evil menace thing, but it's not like most people would kind of pigeonhole me in, I don't think. So it's quite nice especially when I got with Richard, it was very much, I thought it was very much against type for me. And I think George thought that as well. I thought, yeah, this isn't exactly what Dan's like, but I think this we could make this work. Especially considering that it is very different to, Thomas was very different to Richard, so Will in a ways were quite similar. But yeah, no.
Definitely, and no, that's quite true. And I think originally you thought that when you read the script, you're like, oh, you mean Thomas, right?
Yeah,
and
Thomas
I'm like,
is me. Surely that's for me.
Like, no, I mean the badass guy.
I'm that wimpy angelic guy.
yeah, exactly.
Me.
I was like, no, well, because the thing is, it's like. I don't like casting for like what the person is, and it's, I mean, for other people's films that works very, very well. People who probably know how to, do things better, but because those character twists and turns that we're talking about and really going deep into a character, to me, I know it's going to be a much easier process to get the really complex shit out of the way, which means I cast for when the person's gonna end up being, rather than what was, because I can really help in making someone look more menacing or really bad, or I can write a really horrible line, that's gonna make them feel like they're an absolute dick.
Let's build towards that.
Well, what I can't do is what Dan is exceptionally good at, is really just give you a window into the soul of that person. And Richard, for example, because he was, I guess, he's quite a complex character, but it's a bit more easy to kind of for us to understand the magic trick there than with Martin. Is the fact that at the end of the day he's a quite pure human being. Right, and all of that slightly goofy, slightly quirky, slightly just really nice good guy nature that the Dan possesses. You want to see some of that in Richard by the end, because that will be so difficult to come through with everything we've seen before that. and if it's someone who's already quite like you know, and just very much the person that Richard embodies as a profession, as a soldier, and as a belief that he has,
Yes.
then you really have to break all of that and then act on top of that to be able to show this. So that just made the whole process easier, and in my own twisted way, I think that makes things a lot easier.
Yeah, I mean, that's sort of, you kind of, where was with Martin, you kind of have a lot more sympathy, even when he's quite ruthless, like with the guys in the masks and stuff. You kind of think, well, these are a bunch of arseholes who are going around beating people up. They're looking for someone to beat up. He's just basically laid the trap for them, and if they have done something to his sister, they basically thoroughly deserve to have their retinas burnt out, or or certainly to be beaten up. So you're kind of with him to a quite very large extent, right up until the scene of the bothy, and then you start to realise this how dark a character he is. Whereas,
we kind of did the opposite trick
Yeah.
with Martin, is because you just see Dan, it's like, hey Dan, just be a nice guy, and then we start peel back, because at this point, we knew each other, and we've done Hex, and we kind of were starting to really dig deeper there, and me and Johnny just went ham on the script, and at some point I remember there was, I think it was either the bothy scene or something else, I just stopped. It's like, I was like, dude, what are we doing? No one can play this guy. Like, this is no one. This is unactable. Like, we need Daniel Day-Lewis, not Daniel Oldroyd.
No.
But then I just knew that we'll do it, and he did it better than any Lewises or any.
Oh, I mean, the line, the bothy scene is just fantastic on so many. I mean, there are a couple of lines in that which there is the sort of, I don't hike, I don't give a shit about tradition.
Oh yeah, I love that line.
Yeah,
that's all Jonathan, I have to say. Yeah.
That
is it's really.
Okay, verse.
It's funny because both of them have this sort of trace of a Western in them, in the setup of both films, and in particularly with the Droving, there's this real soupçon de deserves got nothing to do with it, sort of hovering in the background. Yeah. So
I'm a big Western fan. I like, I like simple plots because they give me a chance to go deeper somewhere else. But it's not, I mean, I like really kind of like heady, complexy, plotty, Nolan-y movies as well. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, it is like when we're trying to really go deeper into a character, I'd be like, like the whole film is like this person goes from left to right, and then they go right to left. Like that's the plot. At the end of the day. But then that just gives you a chance to do everything else. In between.
Definitely. Something I was going to ask is, in terms of the Droving, did you, to some degree, construct it around the Droving itself, around the like you heard about this thing that happens somewhere, and went, this would be a perfect backdrop for a film?
Yeah, well, the Droving was one of the first elements, because I remember we had a little. We had a few times where do you remember when Hex came out and you came around to the house and we all watched it, and Dan, if you remember.
Oh
yeah, and then did we watch that also, that terrible film that was amazing?
Oh God,
yeah.
Oh God,
Bone Hunter, that's
horrible, but brilliant, amazing.
Anyway, so we would like watch bad films as well. Anyway, so as part of our little celebration for Hex coming up, we went, where all the crew is, and Dan came, and at some point we went to the Lake District.
Yeah.
And there was they had a Christmas Lantern Festival that was happening in November, but that was in Ambleside. And then I remember Jonathan told me, well, do you know, like actually in Penrith they have one where it's called the Droving, and it's a bit more horror, it's not as Christmas. Like, oh, that's cool, because I was walking around the Ambleside one, and I just saw how great because I love verticality in films, because it gives you, like, you don't just have like a simple plane of how to shoot things. And I saw all these processions going on, and I said, like, oh man, I can just imagine a thriller, someone being chased around in this. Like, we have to do something here, and and that was it. That we'd never thought about that again until much later when we then we looked into the droving, and kind of all of these elements came together. And we actually even went to Ambleside, a very stressful day of shooting, which is not going to differentiate it, but from any of the other days of shooting, where we because the droving has some scenes also there, so it's kind of like jumbled from a few different sets. So yeah, we absolutely use that as a bit of a backdrop, but yeah, I mean, aside from the animal mass and the people and that great backdrop, all the merchant stuff and everything, that's just our imagination, really.
I was going to ask about the Merchant of Souls, if that was just an actual folk tale or something that you'd invented to kind of bring everything together. But
it is an invention. I mean, obviously it's inspired by like every character ever, when you really think about it. You have a lot of Satan-y stuff in there. I mean, obviously you have a lot of a big underworld merchant vibe,
Yeah.
You have a little bit of like the guy in Resident Evil 4 with the big coat, and that says like, I know what I'm talking about. Yeah, and also people who come to Cheltenham for the races. That's where the outfit came from. I just said I want him to look like that, and Johnny said, I think that's a pretty good idea.
I've got to say, I loved Alexander King's performance. I guess one of those ones like struck me as well about Susie Garton in HEX, was particularly is that you've got these small these performances which only happen. They've got like one scene really.
Yeah.
But that scene is so crucial and so much hangs upon it. I mean, we're hoping to do a follow-up interview with Susie. I was trying to get hold of her in time for this, but couldn't. And having five people, I would be getting left out a bit as it stands. But
it's hard enough, unfortunately.
Yeah, so we might try and do a follow-up with Susie at some point. But with the merchant, I mean, what struck me, I mean, he seems so kind and understanding right until that last line, when you can see his face kind of, all his muscles kind of face kind of twitching. What if there was something I could do about that? Oh,
yeah,
Jesus.
Yeah. I mean, it's a real. It works because it really references all those moments where Christianity intersects with something that came before. So he reminded me a lot of fairy tales, like literally tales of the Fae, but also where those tales tend to cross over with Christian Satanist iconography. Yeah,
and I think there's a lot of Greek mythology in there as well. I mean, me and Jonathan, I was talking to him about a lot of river Styx stuff. That's why it kind of starts on a jetty at the beginning, and you have that's why the cave and there was a lot that it seemed like an entrance to the underworld, because at the end of the day, the deal is that he's going to bring like dead people back. It's not necessarily you shouldn't be thinking about him as a necessarily an evil character, more than he just thinks about death in a different way. Now, obviously, for our understanding, he's very evil, but in a way, next to Martin as well, who's very human, very human type of evil, and again understandable. And I mean, it's funny how we have a literal serial killer in there, and people put him in like number 4 or 3 somewhere at the list of the most evil characters in the droving, which is quite funny.
Because we can all understand how how if we lost the person we cared most, how far would you go to get them back? It's I mean, Martin does. I mean, that's how Martin kind of goads him into finally showing his hand, isn't it? And he sort of says the hardest thing to accept is that person will, no matter what you do, that person will always be dead.
Yeah,
that's right.
It's a nerve, because if Martin's right, then Simon's already killed 2 people for nothing.
Yeah, exactly. It's always that. The sacrifice worth what you have to give up for it?
Yeah, and the interesting thing on that is that's actually originally Simon was supposed to be a bit more of a stereotypical kind of looking serial killer guy, and it was going to be Alexander King. Like, we cast him for Simon initially, because we imagined that he's going to be a great foil to Martin. The only few people that it can be, but then when we saw Bobby Robertson as well, we saw that, like, well, he's not, he's not the main antagonist in that way.
Yeah.
And someone like that, like Bobby's so, lovable, as you know, Dan, and he's so like relatable from that point of view, because you can imagine him doing like just stupid things out of love, but at the same time, someone who like there is a real human emotion under all the evil acts that he's committing. And Alex was meant, because like the merchant is the only character that can beat Martin in his own game.
Yeah.
Which is very difficult to believe, since we've made sure that we show Martin how good at his game is throughout the film. Alex is the only one who could have come close, and that's why we kind of ended up switching the roles around.
Well, the worst thing I think in both movies is that they end in a place of thinking that you're doing bad things for a good reason.
I think I'm just like deathly scared of that every time I do anything. I'm like, is it like I think it's a big part of every time you're trying to think in a kind of a big scale way and see what comes in the end. So both films are
it's the human condition.
Yeah, it is.
Good question for you there. Because like I said, but Martin is as a character, he's like in every scene, almost every shot. So it's a huge burden performance-wise to carry on your shoulders. But in I can imagine in terms of just the actual shoot for the Droving, because I remember there's a story about Richard Burbage, which may be true or apocryphal, because obviously he originated a lot of Shakespeare's roles, including Richard III. And one of the things that if you've read coming across in Year of the King by Anthony Sher, which is always a good read for actors. My acting days are long behind me, but there was a bit about how one of the things that marks Richard III out as an earlier play for Shakespeare is that he doesn't give Richard a break. He has no time. There's like Macbeth has the scene when Malcolm and Macduff are in England, where the guy playing Macbeth can basically go backstage and put his feet up for 10 minutes before coming back into the next bit of Sturm und Drang. Whereas Richard's just on stage throughout, and there is a story that Burbage actually said to Shakespeare afterwards, "If you ever do that to me again, I'll bloody kill you." True or not, we are not sure, but at least obviously you weren't having to be on stage non-stop. But it's you having to carry this whole thing. So I can imagine the film shoot being quite an arduous one for you in many ways, physically and emotionally.
Yeah. It was. I wouldn't change it for the world. But it was very difficult. It was more difficult than doing HEX, definitely, because there was definitely times where it would just be Will who was being shot, and I wasn't there. I could be sat off camera, but like with this, it was pretty much. I was pretty much on every page, so it was. It's really rewarding in that sense. It's like, oh god, this might be the only time in my life where I am the lead. I'm on every page. I need to be like here like all the time. But yeah,
spoilers. It's not.
Yeah. Some scenes are definitely harder than others.
Oh, sorry about that. That's here.
It could have been outside my house as well.